Every NBA decade has its legends, its moments, and its champions. But the 2000s might be the most misunderstood decade in basketball history. While everyone talks about the magic of the 80s and the dominance of the 90s, the 2000s are often dismissed as boring, slow, or forgettable. But what if I told you that this decade wasn't just important, it was essential? What if I told you that without the 2000s, there might not be an NBA as we know it today? During this decade, we witnessed the lowest television ratings in modern NBA history. We saw a brawl that nearly destroyed the league's reputation forever. We watched as the sport became so defensive that scoring plummeted to levels not seen since the 1950s. But we also witnessed the rise of three generational talents who would define basketball for the next 2 decades. We saw the most dominant big man since Wilt Chamberlain. We witnessed playoff series that redefined clutch performance. And most importantly, we saw a league transform itself from near collapse to global phenomenon. This is the complete story of how the NBA survived its darkest decade. The 2000s began with promise. Michael Jordan had retired again, this time seemingly for good, and the league was ready to move forward. The Lakers had just acquired Shaquille O'Neal's new running mate in Kobe Bryant, a teenager with unlimited potential. The Spurs had Tim Duncan, the most fundamentally sound player anyone had ever seen. And scattered throughout the league were young stars ready to take the torch. But nobody could have predicted what was coming. The first warning sign came in the 2000 NBA Finals. The Indiana Pacers, led by Reggie Miller and Jalen Rose, pushed the Lakers to 6 games despite being massive underdogs. It should have been a feel-good story, an aging team making one last run against a young dynasty. Instead, the series averaged just 12.1 million viewers per game, the lowest finals ratings since 1981. The writing was already on the wall, but nobody wanted to read it. Then came the 2001 Finals, and suddenly things looked different. The Lakers swept through the Western Conference playoffs with a 15-1 record, one of the most dominant playoff runs in NBA history. Allen Iverson and the Philadelphia 76ers provided the perfect foil in the finals, with AI stepping over Tyronn Lue becoming an instant classic moment. The series averaged 16.9 million viewers, and for a moment, it seemed like the post-Jordan NBA had found its identity. Shaq was unstoppable in the paint, averaging 33 points and 16 rebounds in the finals. Kobe was becoming the next great superstar, hitting impossible shots and playing with a swagger that reminded everyone of a certain someone who wore number 23. The Lakers repeated in 2002, sweeping the New Jersey Nets in what many consider the most lopsided finals in modern history. Jason Kidd and the Nets were simply overmatched, and Shaq dominated to such a degree that the series felt predetermined before it started. But here's where the story takes its first dark turn. While the Lakers were winning championships, the rest of the league was struggling to find its identity. Scoring was declining rapidly as teams embraced defensive systems that prioritized stopping opponents over entertaining fans. The average team scored 95.1 points per game in 2004 compared to 105.3 just 6 years earlier. Games were becoming slugfests, with final scores that looked more like football than basketball. The Detroit Pistons embodied this new reality, building a championship team around defense and teamwork rather than individual stardom. When they shocked the Lakers in the 2004 Finals, winning in 5 games despite having no true superstar, it marked a seismic shift in how basketball was played and perceived. The Pistons' victory should have been celebrated as a triumph of team basketball over individual talent. Instead, it marked the beginning of the NBA's darkest period. The 2004 Finals averaged just 11.5 million viewers, and the series was widely criticized as boring and unwatchable. Fans complained that the games were too slow, too defensive, and lacked the star power that made the NBA appointment television during the Jordan era. The league's marketing machine struggled to promote players like Ben Wallace and Rasheed Wallace, defensive specialists who didn't fit the traditional mold of NBA superstars. Meanwhile, the sport's international appeal was waning as European and Asian audiences found the product increasingly difficult to watch and understand. Then came November 19, 2004, and everything changed forever. The Detroit Pistons are playing the Indiana Pacers at the Palace of Auburn Hills when a routine foul by Ben Wallace on Ron Artest escalated into something no one could have imagined. Wallace shoved Artest, players from both benches started jawing, and for a moment, it looked like just another NBA scuffle that would be broken up in seconds. But then a fan threw a cup of beer at Artest as he lay on the scorer's table, and the Indiana forward charged into the stands. What followed was 9 minutes of absolute chaos that would define the NBA's reputation for years to come. Players fighting fans throwing chairs and debris, security personnel overwhelmed by the violence. The images were broadcast live across the country and immediately became international news. This wasn't just a basketball fight. This was a symbol of everything wrong with professional sports and American culture. The fallout was swift and brutal. Ron Artest was suspended for the entire season, 73 games in total. Steven Jackson received a 30-game suspension. Jermaine O'Neal got 25 games, later reduced to 15. Ben Wallace received 6 games for his role in starting the altercation. In total, 9 players were suspended for 146 games, making it the most severe punishment in NBA history. But the real damage went far beyond individual suspensions. Corporate sponsors began questioning their association with the league. Television ratings plummeted even further as casual fans associated the NBA with violence and lawlessness. The incident reinforced negative stereotypes about professional basketball players and created a public relations nightmare that would take years to overcome. Commissioner David Stern knew he had to act decisively. Within months, the league implemented a dress code requiring players to wear business casual attire when representing their teams. The decision was controversial, with many players claiming it was racially motivated, but Stern was determined to change the league's image. He also cracked down on technical fouls, flagrant fouls, and any behavior that could be construed as threatening or unprofessional. The message was clear. The NBA would no longer tolerate anything that damaged its reputation. But while these changes were necessary from a business perspective, they also contributed to the perception that the league was becoming increasingly corporate and sanitized. Meanwhile, on the court, the product continued to suffer. The 2005 finals between the San Antonio Spurs and Detroit Pistons was a defensive masterpiece that averaged just 8.2 million viewers per game, the lowest finals rating in NBA history. Tim Duncan and the Spurs won their 3rd championship in 7 years, but their methodical, fundamental approach to basketball didn't translate to television gold. Games regularly featured final scores in the 70s and 80s, with both teams struggling to reach 40% shooting. The 7-game series was technically excellent, featuring incredible defense and tactical coaching, but it was also slow, grinding, and difficult for casual fans to appreciate. The problem wasn't just that games were low-scoring, it was that they were genuinely difficult to watch. Hand-checking was still legal, allowing defenders to constantly grab and impede offensive players. The illegal defense rules created confusion about what constitutes a zone defense, leading to awkward spacing and stagnant offense. Three-point shooting was at historical lows, with teams averaging fewer than 5 made threes per game. The paint was clogged with big men who couldn't shoot beyond 10 feet, making driving lanes virtually non-existent. Even the league's biggest stars struggled to create offense against these defensive systems. But while the NBA was struggling with its image and entertainment value, something interesting was happening beneath the surface. A new generation of players was developing that would eventually save the league. LeBron James entered the NBA directly from high school in 2003, bringing a combination of size, speed, and basketball IQ that hadn't been seen since Magic Johnson. Carmelo Anthony and Dwayne Wade joined the league the same year, giving the NBA 3 instant stars who could carry the torch for the next decade. Chris Paul entered in 2005, immediately establishing himself as the best point guard in the game. These players understood that individual excellence had to be combined with team success, and they were willing to embrace whatever style of play gave them the best chance to win. The 2006 NBA Finals marked the beginning of the league's recovery. The Miami Heat, led by Shaquille O'Neal and a young Dwayne Wade, faced the Dallas Mavericks in a series that had everything the league needed. Wade's performance was nothing short of spectacular, averaging 34.7 points, 7.8 rebounds, and 3.8 assists while shooting 61% from the free throw line. The Heat's comeback from a 2-0 deficit was dramatic and emotionally satisfying, giving the league a new superstar and a compelling narrative about perseverance and growth. The series averaged 13 million viewers, a significant improvement over recent years, and Wade's emergence as a clutch performer gave the NBA a marketable star who could help carry the league forward. The following year brought even more promise when the San Antonio Spurs swept the Cleveland Cavaliers in the finals. But the real story was LeBron James' arrival on the biggest stage. Despite being just 22 years old, LeBron carried an overmatched Cavaliers team through the Eastern Conference playoffs, including a legendary performance against the Detroit Pistons, where he scored 25 straight points to close out Game 5. His finals debut was disappointing from a team perspective, but individually it announced that the NBA had found its next transcendent superstar. LeBron's combination of athletic ability and basketball intelligence was unprecedented, and his willingness to embrace the spotlight gave the league exactly what it needed to build around. The 2008 finals between the Boston Celtics and Los Angeles Lakers marked the official end of the NBA's dark period. The series had everything: history, star power, compelling storylines, and most importantly, entertaining basketball. The Celtics' big three of Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, and Ray Allen provided veteran leadership and championship experience. The Lakers countered with Kobe Bryant in his prime and a supporting cast that included Pau Gasol and Lamar Odom. The series went 6 games, featured multiple overtime contests, and showcased the kind of high-level basketball that reminded fans why they fell in love with the sport in the first place. Game 4 alone, won by the Lakers in overtime, drew 17.4 million viewers and featured some of the most clutch shooting in finals history. But perhaps more importantly than the entertainment value was what the 2008 finals represented symbolically. The Celtics hadn't won a championship since 1986, and their title drought mirrored the league's struggle to find its identity in the post-Jordan era. When Paul Pierce was named Finals MVP after averaging 21.8 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 6.3 assists, it validated the idea that team basketball could still produce compelling individual performances. The series also showcased how rule changes implemented during the decade were finally paying dividends. Hand checking had been eliminated, creating more space for offensive players. The three-point line had been moved back to its original distance, rewarding skilled shooters. And the overall pace of play had increased as teams realized that entertainment value was directly connected to financial success. By 2009, the transformation was complete. The Lakers and Orlando Magic met in the finals, with Kobe Bryant finally winning a championship without Shaquille O'Neal and establishing himself as the best player in the world. The series averaged 14.9 million viewers and featured the kind of high-scoring, fast-paced basketball that had been missing for most of the decade. Dwight Howard's emergence as a dominant center provided hope that big men could still be entertaining, while Kobe's fadeaway jumpers and clutch performances reminded everyone why individual excellence was so important to the NBA's appeal. The decade concluded with one of the most significant developments in NBA history: the rise of social media and digital content. Players began connecting directly with fans through Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, creating personal brands that transcended team affiliations. This direct connection helped humanize players who had been portrayed as distant and threatening during the early 2000s, showing fans that NBA stars were funny, thoughtful, and relatable. The league also began embracing advanced statistics and analytics, providing new ways for fans to understand and appreciate player performance beyond traditional box score numbers. Looking back, the 2000s weren't the NBA's lost decade. They were its growing decade. The challenges faced during this period forced the league to examine everything about its product, from rules and regulations to marketing and presentation. The defensive revolution that made games boring in the short term ultimately led to rule changes that created more offensive freedom. The image problems that arose from the Malice at the Palace forced the league to become more professional and media savvy. The declining television ratings motivated innovative approaches to fan engagement and digital content creation. Most importantly, the 2000s established a foundation for the NBA's current golden age. LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett, Dirk Nowitzki, Steve Nash, and countless other superstars developed their games during this decade, creating a generation of players who understood that individual excellence and team success were not mutually exclusive. The defensive innovations pioneered by teams like the Pistons and Spurs eventually led to more sophisticated offensive systems that made basketball more strategic and compelling. And the league's willingness to adapt and evolve during difficult times demonstrated the kind of leadership that would carry the NBA to unprecedented global popularity in the following decades. The 2000s proved that sometimes you have to break something completely before you can build it back stronger. The NBA nearly died during this decade, but it also discovered what it needed to become the global entertainment phenomenon it is today. Every low-scoring finals, every boring playoff series, every controversy and crisis contributed to a learning process that made the league smarter, more entertaining, and more resilient. The next time someone tells you the 2000s were a forgettable decade in NBA history, remind them that without those 10 difficult years, there might not be an NBA to forget. This was the decade that saved basketball by nearly destroying it first. What do you think was the most important moment of the 2000s for the NBA's survival? Was it the malice at the palace that forced necessary changes, or was it the emergence of LeBron, Kobe, and Duncan that gave the league new stars to build around? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into NBA history, make sure to subscribe for more content breaking down the most important stories and eras in basketball. Hit that like button if you learned something new about how the NBA transformed itself from near disaster to global phenomenon. And let me know what decade or topic you want me to cover next.